The rain didn't just fall, it erased the city. It hammered against the gallery's plate glass window, turning the lights of Manhattan into blurry, bleeding watercolors. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of wet wool and polite disappointment. My own disappointment was anything but polite. It was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. My drawings were pinned to a stark white wall in the corner, a series of architectural concepts I called structures of air and light. They were buildings that curved and flowed, that defied the rigid geometry of the city I grew up in. They were, in the words of the gallery owner who just rejected me, beautiful but fundamentally unbuildable, more sculpture than architecture, I'm afraid. My family stood a few feet away, a tight little island of sympathy and quiet judgment. My mother clutched her purse, her expression a practiced mask of maternal support. My father, a man who'd spent 40 years as an accountant, just looked confused, as if trying to balance a column that would never add up. And then there was my Uncle Frank. He was a contractor, a man who understood the world in terms of rebar, concrete tonnage, and profit margins. He walked over to my display, his expensive shoes squeaking on the polished floor. He squinted at a drawing of a residential tower that spiraled towards the sky like a ribbon of frozen smoke. "It's a nice drawing, Leo," he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the gallery's murmur. "Real nice. But a building has to stand up. It has to have straight lines for the plumbing. Who's going to pay for a place with no right angles?" He chuckled, a short, sharp sound. "It's a fantasy, a hobby." He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be comforting, but felt like an anchor. "Look, kid, I can get you a job tomorrow, a real job." "You can be a site manager. Learn the business from the ground up. There's good money in putting up solid, sensible buildings. People will always need a box to live in." My face burned. The knot in my stomach tightened. It wasn't just the gallery's rejection. It was this, the casual assassination of a dream by the person who was supposed to be family. He saw my life's passion as a childish phase I needed to grow out of. I looked past him, at my father, who just offered a weak, helpless shrug. That night, the rejection became a strange kind of key. It unlocked a door I hadn't realized was closed. As I walked home through the relentless rain, the water soaking through my jacket and chilling me to the bone, a profound clarity washed over me. It was a grief-stricken clarity, the kind you get when you realize something has to die for you to live. They would never understand. Not here, in this city, in this family. I would always be the kid with the silly drawings. I packed 2 suitcases the next day. I sold my car, drained my small savings account, and bought a one-way ticket to Los Angeles. I told my mother I had a job opportunity. I told my father it was a chance to get some new experience. I didn't even bother telling Uncle Frank. He'd just see it as running away. Maybe it was. But it felt more like running towards something. The first 2 years in LA were a blur of sun-bleached stucco and crushing anonymity. I lived in a shoebox apartment in Koreatown that smelled of kimchi and exhaust fumes. I took a job as a draftsman at a corporate firm that designed strip malls. It was soul-crushing work. I spent my days drawing straight lines, calculating load-bearing walls for discount shoe stores and fast food joints. I was designing the very boxes Uncle Frank championed. But at night, my apartment became my studio, fueled by cheap coffee and a stubborn refusal to die inside. I drew. I filled sketchbooks with my unbuildable structures. I taught myself new 3D modeling software. I studied the work of architects who weren't afraid of a curve, who understood that a building could be a poem. The loneliness was a physical presence, a heavy blanket in the hot, still nights. Phone calls home were brief and stilted. "Are you eating enough?" my mother would ask. "How's the weather?" my father would try. "Heard you're drawing drugstores now," Frank said once. When he picked up the phone. "See, I told you you'd come around to the real world." I almost hung up. I almost booked a flight home. But instead, I just said, "It pays the bills, Frank." And then I went back to my models, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and resolve. The break came in the form of a small, independent competition to design a new wing for a modern art museum in Santa Monica. The budget was tiny, the prestige minimal. Most established firms wouldn't touch it. I poured every free second for 3 months into my proposal. It was a structure of glass and white steel that seemed to float, its walls curving away from each other, as if in a slow-motion exhale. It was everything Frank said a building should be, and I won. It was a small thing, but it was mine. Getting it built was a nightmare of budget cuts and contractor arguments, but when it was finished and the California sun poured through the impossibly shaped skylights, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. A critic for an architecture journal called it a startlingly lyrical debut. That one small project led to another. A private home nestled in the Hollywood Hills, cantilevered over a canyon. A small community library in Oregon that looked like a stack of open books. I quit the strip mall job. I opened my own small studio. I was still barely scraping by, but the work was honest. It was mine. Years passed. The small projects became larger ones. The firm grew. We started getting noticed, winning awards. I was still a relative unknown in the grand scheme of things, but I was no longer a draftsman in a cubicle. I was an architect. I was building my fantasies. Then came the call from New York. A new consortium was building a major Oceanic Institute on the redeveloped waterfront. They wanted a landmark building, something iconic. They were inviting a handful of firms to submit proposals. It was a long shot. A Goliath of a project for a firm my size, but they had seen my library in Oregon. They were intrigued. We worked for 6 months, day and night. My design was the boldest thing I had ever conceived. A building that mimicked the bioluminescent creatures of the deep sea, its translucent skin glowing from within, its form rising from the pier like a great, gentle wave. It was the culmination of everything I had ever believed about what a building could be. We won. The news was so monumental, so life-altering, it felt unreal. My name, my little LA firm, was suddenly attached to one of the most anticipated new projects on the New York skyline. A few months later, an email came from my mother. My father was turning 70. They were having a party at the old house in Queens. "Everyone will be here," she wrote. "Please come, Leo. It's been too long." 8 years. It had been 8 years since I'd stood in that gallery in the rain. Walking back into that house was like stepping into a time capsule. The same smell of my mother's pot roast, the same scuff marks on the hardwood floors, the same framed photos on the mantelpiece, with me slowly vanishing from the more recent ones. The party was loud and crowded. Aunts, uncles, cousins I barely recognized. They all greeted me with a strange mixture of curiosity and caution. I was the prodigal son, the one who'd run off to California. "Leo, look at you!" My Aunt Carol said, pinching my cheek. "You got some sun. Are you still doing that drawing thing?" I just smiled. "Something like that. It's going well." My father hugged me, a real hug this time, his eyes a little misty. "It's good to have you home, son." Then I saw him, holding court by the makeshift bar in the kitchen. Uncle Frank. He was grayer, heavier, but otherwise unchanged. He was telling some story about a concrete pour, gesturing with his thick hands. He spotted me, and a slow grin spread across his face. "Well, well, look what the cat dragged in," he boomed, walking over. "Hollywood himself. Heard you're building wacky houses for movie stars now. Must be nice." It's good to see you, Frank, I said, my voice even. The old anger was gone, replaced by a quiet distance. So you finally making a real living with those doodles? He asked, taking a sip of his beer. Or are you still one paycheck away from coming home to work for me? Before I could answer, my cousin Sarah came bustling over, her phone in her hand. Oh my God, Leo, I didn't want to say anything, but I have to. My friend who works at Metropolis magazine sent me this. It's the cover for next month. She turned the phone screen toward me, and there it was. A glossy, high-resolution rendering of my Oceanic Institute, glowing against the twilight Manhattan skyline. My name was printed in bold letters at the bottom. Leo Rossi, the return of a visionary. I hadn't even seen it yet. I stared at the image, a strange feeling swelling in my chest. It was real. Wow, Leo, Sarah breathed. That's incredible. The little circle of family around us went quiet. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father leaned in, his glasses slipping down his nose, and a slow, wondering smile spread across his face. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at Uncle Frank. He'd gone silent. He took the phone from Sarah's hand, his contractor's eyes scanning the image. He wasn't looking at it like a piece of art. He was looking at it like a set of blueprints. I could see him mentally calculating the sheer impossibility of it, the cantilevered curves, the acres of